What's up, everybody? What's up, MGTOW? So this video is gonna be on the hippie problem. And now you might be thinking, of course, yeah, hippies had a lot of problems, but I'm talking more in the context of reproductive activities and more so the reliance on the state. Because as we all know, during the free love revolution of the 60s and 70s, of course, a lot of things happened, like birth control was widely available and people stopped being married as much or having more premarital sex. We can say that. And from that, a lot of children were born because, before the whole AIDS epidemic or AIDS scare, however you want to look at it, there were a lot of people having unprotected sex, especially in the 60s and 70s, and then they were having a lot of kids, and then they basically became the yuppies and the baby boomers, which, as you can see, they've become some of the most statist, state-loving people in the entire country and possibly in American history. So we have to look at why that happened. Of course, during the 60s and 70s, they were trying to radically change society, but then sometime in between them trying to radically change society and them having children, they became extremely dependent on the state. They pretty much okayed all of the factors now that we have of neoliberalism in order to buy trinkets and toys and vacations and nice cars for their families, that then neoliberalism pretty much shifted the job market to a point where it became very difficult, except for a small percentage of the next generation, to find secure and well-paying jobs. So looking at it in that context, we can see that when people start to have children, they start to become more reliant on the state. It's just a fact of physics. It's just a whatever you want to call it. It's just what happens. I mean, even some of the most staunch anarchists, like, for instance, Stefan Molyneux, he doesn't really want the state to go away. I mean, he's got a daughter, and I really doubt that he wants the police and the army to just go away. And that's a symptom of having children, is that you become reliant on the state. You become reliant on the police and the fire department and the military because you've got to be at work all the time, and you're become much more fearful of your children's safety than even your own safety. Especially as a man, you're like, oh, whatever, somebody wants to fight me or try to do something harmful to me, I'll just deal with it. But then when you have a kid, you're like, oh no, nothing's going to happen to this kid. I got to make sure that this kid is safe at all times. And then the next step is to pretty much endorse whatever the state wants to do. So why am I saying all this? Well, as we can see through the kind of historical lens, that the people that were the hippies or whatever have now moved into becoming the most statist, state-loving people possibly in history. And now they're the establishment, and the people that they were fighting against, which were mainly kind of like a Christian, conservative, traditionalist, right-wing type of, I guess, philosophy, you can say, or establishment. Now the kind of conservative, traditional, Christian, right-wing establishment is more in the position of where the hippies were in the 60s and 70s, where they're trying to radically change society from the established norms, which are the established norms are now established by those people that were hippies. So without getting too deep into the whole back and forth dialectic of conservative versus liberal, we could see that the conservatives are trying to change society and they're in the position of the radicals or the anti-establishment people. But what I see from the conservative right and the traditionalist is that they're making the same mistake that the hippies made, is that instead of fixing society while they're still young and have, freedom and they're not worried about their children being harmed, they're endorsing everyone to just go and have children blindly and then we'll fix the problem later. And you can see a lot of this within the attack on MGTOW. Now, to me, people say that MGTOW is anti-marriage, and I think that's kind of a misnomer. I think that MGTOW is extremely anti-divorce, and as Christian conservatives or traditionalists should easily be able to understand, the best way to avoid unwanted things is to abstain from actions that could get you into positions where unwanted things could happen. So I think that most traditionalists or conservatives or whatever are against willy-nilly divorce, but yet in the current system that's dominated by the kind of liberal hippie type of ethics where willy-nilly divorce is extremely easily accessible and almost endorsed by the state, endorsing people on your side to just blindly get married and have children, putting them at the mercy of the liberal state where they could get willy-nilly divorced at any time, isn't really the best plan of action. Because like I said, MGTOW isn't really against marriage. At least me personally, I'd like to see anybody being able to be happy, in a relationship or not in a relationship if they want. But the outcome of almost 50% divorce rate and 70% initiated by women, anybody that looks at statistics or looks at facts or anything like that has to at least question that. And by blindly sending people in to get married and thinking that some type of, resurgence of nationalism or resurgence of Christianity or something like that is going to extremely reduce the divorce rate, it's not realistic. I guess to put it in an analogy form, it's kind of like, you're expecting people to jump out of an airplane before checking to see if they have a parachute. Of course, jumping out of an airplane is probably a really fun experience. You're falling and you can fly around and spin around in the air and do all this fun stuff. But nobody wants to crash and land on the ground in a rocky ravine. Nobody wants to do that. But if you have a bunch of guys and you're telling them, oh, hey, jumping out of a plane is awesome. Yeah, here, try it. Just jump out of this plane. And you don't give them a parachute. You don't even tell them about physics and how far they're going to fall and all this other stuff. And then you just expect them all to jump out of the plane. And then when some guys are saying, hey, I heard that humans can't fly. And, if I just jump out of this plane, I might die in the bottom of this rocky ravine here. And as fun as jumping out of the plane seems like it would be, and I really want to jump out of the plane, there's got to be some other way to do this. And then the conservatives turn to, oh, you're a pussy. Oh, you don't want to jump out of the plane? What is all this talk about flying? No. See, I got a system where, every third person that jumps out of the plane, they magically land on the ground. And we don't know which one of the people is going to magically land on the ground on their feet uninjured. But maybe it's you. Maybe it may be you. It may not be you, but you just got to experience falling. You got to experience jumping out of this plane to know if you're going to be the magic man or not. And so you can see how that kind of sounds ridiculous to somebody that takes into account the statistics and listens to what has happened to actual men that went through the family court system and went through divorce court and all that stuff. And it's just not fun. It's not No one wants to land in that rocky ravine. So, like I'm saying, to say that MGTOW is anti-marriage is not a correct way to put it. MGTOW is anti-divorce. And in the current society, divorce is almost inevitable. It's a 50-50 chance. So the only reason that I can think of that people wouldn't want to change the laws or at least look into it is that either they don't care about losing all their money and having their life ruined in a divorce because they feel like it's worth it, or they feel like they're above the system in some way and that whatever they have to offer is so great and so wonderful that they'll never get a divorce. And that second argument is easily countered by the countless amounts of celebrity divorces and leaders of industry getting divorced. And I mean, we could go through lists and lists and lists of rich, famous, attractive guys that have gotten divorced in the last decade alone. So that argument is kind of mute. So the only other thing is that people just really don't care. They think that it's worth it. They think that losing all their stuff and having their life destroyed and all that stuff is worth the value of jumping out of the plane. And then to turn around and to kind of talk down to men, or I don't even think it's talking down. I think at this point, MGTOW is used as kind of like a reference point for men to display their status, where you can easily reference, I'm not like MGTOW. I respect women. I love getting divorced. I'm totally willing to get divorced at any time, and I can withstand the divorce because I'm not like those MGTOW guys that are afraid, quote unquote, of getting divorced, afraid of jumping out of a plane with no parachute. But it does lead one to wonder why people don't talk about that situation, why people don't focus on the laws and they don't focus on the social aspects that surround the laws that surround divorce, but rather focus on the men who choose not to take that route. And to me, again, it does seem like it's some type of display of status rather than any actual like rational or logical reasoning behind why they don't want to understand. Realistically, that's what it seems like. It seems like it's something that people, they don't want to understand why men are going MGTOW. Because, if you were about to jump out of a plane with no parachute, the last thing that you'd really want to contemplate is the fact that humans can't fly, because that might stop you from jumping out of that plane. So you just kind of block it out of your mind and hum or whistle and then jump out of the plane. But again, like I was saying, to have people and to endorse for men to just go out there and get married, have children before fixing the situation is like telling a man to jump out of a plane with no parachute when you could easily give him a parachute, when you could easily figure out a way to make sure that everybody's got a parachute before they jump out of the plane. But it seems as though there's something, I don't know what it is. It's almost like it's this masculine or pseudo-masculine thing to prove to women that you're not like MGTOW and you'll jump out of the plane without a parachute. And those MGTOW guys talking about parachutes and humans can't fly and all this other stuff, they're insane. I mean, you see it in the conspiracy community as well, where people will bring up MGTOW and they'll say, oh, MGTOW is dividing men and women. And it's like, you missed a huge thing. I mean, it's just so interesting that you could be the conspiracy community and you can do a 30-hour video on the earth being flat, or you can do a 2-month-long, a 2-month-long series of videos on vaccines or on Illuminati symbolism. But then when it comes to looking at actual government statistics surrounding divorce and alimony and feminism and how we got here, it just becomes like a soundbite. It's like, oh yeah, and feminism. But because you don't want to offend the women that are watching your channel, and the reality is that a lot of the social problems that most of the people in the conspiracy community are against are caused by the government laws that are surrounding the interaction between men and women. And it's just interesting that people will go into the minutia of all these other topics, but then when it comes to anything related to MGTOW philosophy, it's always a soundbite. It's always, oh, MGTOW, they're trying to divide men and women. Or, oh, MGTOW, those guys that don't want to get married. Or, oh, MGTOW, those guys that are sworn off women. Or, oh, MGTOW, those guys that just they're afraid to get married, or they can't handle getting married. There's never a detailed discussion of MGTOW philosophy. And that's what makes me think that people they don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about the reality that when they're jumping out of that plane with no parachute, that they can't fly. And it's just an annoyance to them that somebody's saying, hey, I heard humans can't fly. Hey, I heard that you need a parachute to jump out of a plane, or a paraglider, or a jetpack, or one of those little squirrel suits, something, anything. Just don't push me out in a t-shirt and some khaki shorts, because I know that humans can't fly. And they're saying, oh, come on, guys, stop talking about that. Stop talking about this humans can't fly stuff. Stop talking about, oh, you need a parachute. I mean, come on, it's fun. It looks fun. It looks really fun. And I heard that about 1/3 of the people that jump out of planes without parachutes survive. So maybe you'll be that lucky guy. And it's just like, I mean, I guess if that's what masculinity has been boiled down to, is just taking risks, like getting into a long-term relationship or marriage that could easily end your social life, your financial life, easily cause you to commit suicide even. If that's what's considered tough, and taking a logical look at the situation and saying that, there's no parachute there is now becoming a pussy, or you're afraid of women, you can't handle rejection, you can't handle this, you can't handle that, then that's what it has to be. It's clown world. It's upside down world, So to me, it really seems that, time is one of the main factors, or even main powers, that men have when it comes to interacting with women, because they've taken away almost every other type of advantage that men have. But time is the one factor, because women have a much shorter fertility window than men. And if men could actually take the time to regroup and discuss the situation across all these different groups of people, especially on the right, which, are disparate groups. You got your Christian conservatives, your traditionalists, your anarchists, your libertarians, conspiracy theorists, and figure out what's the best course of action for men. Because obviously jumping out of a plane with no parachute is not the best course of action. And anybody that tells me that jumping out of a plane with no parachute is the best course of action either has bad intentions for me, or is completely ignorant of the fact that humans can't fly. And then you expect me to work with you, but then when I'm saying, hey, humans can't fly, you're calling me all types of names and this and that, and just disparaging remarks in soundbite form. But I think that if men could actually sit down and figure out what is the best course of action, then it would, incentivize a lot more men to want to have families and to want to get married and have children and all that stuff. But if you're just going to ignore people and, like I said, make derogatory remarks and not really research into the philosophy or any of the information being presented, even though it's all government statistics and stuff like that, it kind of becomes hard to have a conversation. And maybe that's what you guys want. Maybe they want, us to get censored by YouTube, and then they can come back and just start making quippy remarks about MGTOW and, oh, MGTOW, it doesn't work, and look, they're going extinct and all this other stuff. But the fact is that you are remaining in the same situation as the hippies, and that you're going to be relying on the government. And if you have children, there's not going to be a way to change the system after that. And we can already see that the way that the system is going, the liberalism is going to remain dominant for quite some time now. So if you have children, it's going to be very difficult for you to avoid the public school system as it is now, and all the different types of social issues that are surrounding liberalism, because you're still going to have to pay your taxes, and you're still going to have to vote and pray that they put somebody that's nice to you in office. But if you don't have children and you don't have a wife, then you can actually get together with other men and actually start to work against the established system. But most people don't want to do that. Most people think that the best course of action is to just go out there, get a wife, get her pregnant. Who cares about the divorce laws? Jump out of that plane with no parachute. So until, somebody actually comes up with a decent argument against MGTOW, which actually includes MGTOW information, I pretty much just ignore anything that people say about MGTOW, because I watch a lot of different channels, and especially with the conspiracy channels and some of the conservative traditionalist channels, I mean, I agree with about 90% of what you guys have to say, whether it's the moral decay of society or how we're kind of using technology in a bad way, or the kind of neoliberal economic policies that export all of our jobs and all this other stuff. I mean, I agree with that. But then when it comes to MGTOW, you guys can't even tell me two actual things that most MGTOW accept as facts. Even though everybody in MGTOW isn't the same, you can't even analyze MGTOW as a real phenomenon. To you, it's just this thing that exists over here that's men that aren't having sex. And a lot of people say MGTOW are just incels. They equate it, it's the same thing. It's like MGTOW are incels. It's almost like because it's not socially acceptable to call people gay anymore as a derogatory remark, where you're kind of separating your status from a gay man. You're like, well, at least I'm not gay. Now it's, at least I'm not a MGTOW, or at least I'm not an incel. But in reality, you don't know what MGTOWs, or a lot of people don't know what incels are talking about either. So that basically justifies me to ignore any remarks that you make about MGTOW, because you're ignorant of it. At least your remarks make it appear as though you're ignorant, because when you equate MGTOW to being the group that's separating men from women, you really just don't have a good grasp on what MGTOW is. And like I said, MGTOW is not anti-marriage. MGTOW is anti-divorce. And the only way to avoid getting divorced is to not get married. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. Have a good day and go MGTOW.